My parents spent my future fund on my sister's wedding, then called me an expense. The night my mother told me my younger sister was an investment and I was an expense, she was sitting at a dining table covered with wedding samples I had helped her get at professional rates. There were imported peonies, gold-edged menus, a scale model of a garden tent, and a linen swatch that cost more per yard than the first dress I ever bought for a job interview. I had driven 4 hours from Kansas City to St. Louis because my parents said they wanted one final family dinner before my sister Blair's wedding. Halfway through the meal, my mother casually mentioned another $18,000 upgrade. I asked one question: "How much is left in the future fund Grandpa set aside for both of us?" My father stopped chewing. Blair looked at her fiancé. My mother did not look embarrassed. She smiled and said, "We used it where it could actually change someone's life." Then she added, "Blair's wedding is an investment in her future. Yours would just be an expense." My sister laughed and said, "Mom, that's brutal." But she was smiling when she said it. I stood up without crying, without shouting, and without giving any of them the dramatic scene they had spent years training me to provide whenever I finally objected. By sunrise, I had 61 missed calls because the family they called me unnecessary had just discovered how much of Blair's luxury wedding was quietly standing on my name. My name is Corinne Walsh. I was 31 when this happened, and for most of my life, my family's favorite word for me was capable. If you have never grown up as the capable child, that probably sounds like a compliment. Sometimes it is. In my house, it meant I was the person who could be disappointed without anybody rearranging the day. Blair was 4 years younger than me, and had always been the daughter who needed things more. She needed more attention because she was sensitive. She needed more clothes because she cared about fashion. She needed more spending money because she had a social life. She needed our parents at every dance recital because performing made her nervous. I needed less because I was so independent. When my 8th grade academic awards ceremony overlapped with Blair's middle school dance showcase, both of my parents went to the dance showcase. My father told me, "You don't need us clapping every time you do something right." I remember pretending that sentence made me proud. The pattern repeated for years. Blair's mistakes brought help, mine brought lessons. Mom called that different needs. Dad privately admitted she was unfair sometimes, but almost never challenged her in the moment. I became the daughter who could be disappointed because everyone trusted me to survive it. My grandfather Walter was the one adult who saw the pattern clearly. When I was 16, he started equal future funds for Blair and me, money for school, a home, a business, or a wedding. Equal future, equal start, he told us. After he died, my parents managed both accounts. Dad convinced me to leave mine where it was, and I later added nearly $14,000 of my own savings. I trusted that Grandpa's equal split still meant something. I was wrong. After college, I moved to Kansas City and became an event operations manager for a regional hotel and venue group called Northline Hospitality. I spent my days fixing the 1,000 invisible disasters between a signed contract and a happy ballroom, so vendors learned that when I vouched for someone, I meant it. I also met Theo Bennett through work. He was a civil engineer on one of our venue projects, calm in the same way I was, but kinder to me than I was to myself. If I had a bad day, he never said, "You'll handle it." He asked, "Do you want help or company?" We got engaged after 3 years. Our plan was 80 guests at a restored greenhouse outside Kansas City, dinner from a local restaurant we loved, no wedding party larger than 4 people, and no debt. My mother's reaction was, "That sounds very you," which was her polite phrase for unimpressive. Blair got engaged 6 months before I did to Preston Adler, an orthodontist from a wealthy St. Louis family. Preston was pleasant. The real obsession was what his family represented to Mom. Blair's garden wedding quickly grew from 100 guests to 180, plus a welcome dinner, luxury transportation, a custom tent, and enough flowers to decorate a hotel lobby. Mom kept saying the wedding had to make the right impression. Mom began calling me constantly for vendor advice, contract questions, and professional introductions. I helped far more than I should have, because some old part of me still confused being useful with being valued, Theo noticed. Do they help with our wedding? He asked one night. No, he nodded. I think you're still applying for a job they assigned you when you were 12. I hated that he was right. I connected Mom to several trusted vendors. And because those vendors knew me, they extended courtesy pricing, softer deposit deadlines, and hard-to-get holds during a busy June weekend. I never guaranteed the bills. I guaranteed that my family would not waste their time. In my industry, that was valuable. Blair occasionally texted, "Thank you." More often, she sent pictures asking, "Which one looks more expensive?" The planning dinner happened 5 months before Blair's wedding. Mom told me Dad wanted both daughters home because Grandpa's future fund needed to be discussed. That was why I went. I drove from Kansas City after work and arrived at their suburban St. Louis home around 7. The dining room table looked less like dinner and more like a production office. Swatches, invoices, menu cards, a miniature floor plan, floral photographs, printed hotel schedules. Blair wore a cream sweater and kept showing Preston pictures of dresses for the welcome dinner. My parents were talking about adding live musicians during cocktail hour. I remember thinking, they have found another way to spend $5,000 before I finished my soup. Dad mentioned that Preston's parents were covering the rehearsal dinner. Mom said that gave our side room to elevate the reception. We're adding the upgraded lighting package, she said. And probably the larger floral treatment at the entrance. How much? I asked. It doesn't matter. Then why did you tell us? She frowned. 18, maybe 20. Theo and I were planning our entire dinner for less than that. I looked at Dad. Does the future fund cover this? Nobody answered. That was the moment my body understood before my mind did. How much is left? Dad cleared his throat. Corinne. How much? Mom put down her wine. We were going to talk to you. You invited me here to talk. Blair suddenly became interested in her plate. How much is left in my half? Dad looked at Mom. Mom answered for him. There isn't really a separate half anymore. The room seemed to move away from me. What does that mean? The money has always been managed together. Grandpa said equal. Your grandfather is not here managing a modern wedding budget. My voice went quiet. How much of the total did you use? Dad said. A substantial amount. How much, Dad? Around 72,000. I actually laughed because the alternative was crying. On Blair's wedding? Mom said. Not all at once. That makes it better? Corinne, please. What about the 14,000 I put in myself? Mom's expression changed from defensive to irritated. We all contribute to family. I contributed to my future. And you have a career? You have Theo. You're doing well. So, because I'm doing well, the money becomes hers? It was never about hers and yours in the childish way you're making it sound. I stared at her. Grandpa literally said equal future, equal start. Your grandfather also thought a wedding cost $15,000. Mine might. Blair finally spoke. That's your choice. Yes, which is why taking my money for yours is not. She rolled her eyes. Oh my God, Corinne, nobody took food out of your mouth. You used money I saved. For a family event. Your wedding is not my family expense. Mom leaned back. That smile appeared. The same calm, superior smile she had used my entire childhood when she was about to explain why fairness would injure Blair. You want the truth? Please. Blair's wedding is an investment in her future. Preston's family moves in circles where these things matter. The relationships matter. The impression matters. You and Theo are doing a small greenhouse wedding with restaurant food. Giving both of you the same amount would make absolutely no sense. I felt my face go hot. So she is an investment, and I am what? Mom did not hesitate. An expense. Silence. Even Dad looked shocked she had said it out loud. Blair gave one quick laugh and clapped once. Mom, brutal. But she was smiling. I looked at her. Do you think she's right? Blair shrugged. I think our weddings are different. That is not what I asked. Preston stared at the table. Blair said, I think you don't need the same things I do. There it was again. You need less, therefore you deserve less. a family philosophy polished over 31 years. I stood. Mom immediately said, "Don't be dramatic." I picked up my coat. Dad said, "Sit down. We can work out some amount for you later." "From where?" "We'll figure it out." "After the wedding?" "Corinne, how much is currently available?" Dad did not answer. "That's what I thought." Mom's voice sharpened. "You are not going to turn your sister's wedding into some scorekeeping exercise because you have unresolved childhood jealousy." I looked at her and felt something inside me finally become quiet. "No," I said. "I'm not." I left. In my car, I sat for 3 minutes with both hands on the steering wheel. My phone started ringing before I pulled away. Mom, then Dad, then Blair. I ignored all three. I opened my work email instead. There were 5 active vendor arrangements connected to Blair's wedding, where my professional relationship had created special treatment. Extended deposit windows, courtesy pricing, priority holds, or flexible payment terms. I did not cancel a single contract. I did not ask anybody to punish my family. I wrote the same basic message to each vendor. Effective immediately, please treat the Adler-Walsh wedding as a direct private client account. I am no longer involved professionally or personally and cannot authorize use of Northline relationships, discounts, holds, or payment flexibility on their behalf. Please communicate all requirements directly to the client. That was it. No revenge speech. No sabotage. I removed my name from a wedding that had been spending it without my permission. Then I drove to Kansas City. By the time I reached Columbia, my mother had left 12 voicemails. By the time I crossed into Kansas City, there were 38 missed calls. At 5:30 the next morning, my phone showed 61. The first voicemail I listened to was Mom screaming, "What did you do?" The answer was nothing extraordinary. Vendors simply restored normal prices, deposits, and deadlines once my professional relationship was removed. Blair texted that I was ruining her wedding and accused me of lifelong jealousy. I replied once, "If I am only an expense, stop charging things to my name." Then I stopped responding. Theo woke around 6, found me at the kitchen table, read the messages, and made coffee before saying anything. "What do you want to do?" he asked. "Nothing." "Good. You don't think I went too far? Did you cancel her wedding?" "No." "Did you take money from her?" "No." "Did you lie to vendors?" "No." "Then you stopped providing favors to people who told you your future was worth less." He slid a mug toward me. "That sounds like a boundary." For the next week, my family treated the boundary like sabotage. Mom called relatives first and told them I had used my career to attack Blair's wedding. When one aunt confronted me, I asked whether Mom had mentioned that part of the money was mine. She had not. Mom also posted vague things online about ungrateful children. I wanted to defend myself publicly, but Theo reminded me I did not need strangers to validate a boundary my family understood perfectly well in private. I blocked the posts instead. 2 weeks later, Dad called from his office number because I had stopped answering family phones. "Can we talk like adults? We could have done that before you spent the money." He sighed. "I should have told you." "Yes. Your mother made the decision originally, but I went along with it." I noticed he still placed her first in the sentence. "You managed the account." "I know. Did you ever tell her no?" Silence. "Dad?" "No." "Why?" "Because Blair was already stressed about Preston's family, and your mother was convinced the wedding needed to meet a certain standard." "And I was what?" He sighed again. "You've always been able to take care of yourself." That sentence hurt more from him than the word expense had from Mom. "So you punished the child who made your life easier." "That is not how I would put it." "How would you?" He had no answer. Then he asked if I could restore the vendor arrangements just through the wedding. "After that, we can make your portion whole over time." I almost admired how perfectly he demonstrated the problem while apologizing for it. "No. Corinne, your sister is facing real financial pressure now." "So, am I less capable suddenly?" "That's not fair." "No, it isn't." I ended the call. The wedding became a strange background noise in my life. Through cousins, I heard they kept the estate but cut the Sunday brunch. The custom entrance flowers were reduced. Transportation changed from luxury shuttles to standard coaches. My mother borrowed money from her sister. My father used a home equity line he had previously sworn he would never touch. Blair still had a beautiful wedding by any sane standard. What she lost was excess. That made her feel robbed. A month before the wedding, I received an email from Blair with the subject family decision. She wrote that given everything that had happened, she and Preston no longer felt comfortable having me at the wedding, because my presence might create tension with vendors and relatives. She said she hoped I understood. At the bottom, she added, "Maybe after the wedding we can heal." I read the email 3 times. I had known we were estranged. Being formally removed still hurt. Theo found me crying in our bedroom. "I thought I was done caring," I said. "You're not a machine. They used my money, used my work, then removed me from the wedding." "Yes. And I still feel guilty. That is training, not truth." The wedding took place in June without me. I worked a Saturday conference in Kansas City because staying home felt worse. Around 6, my cousin Maribel texted a photograph of the seating chart. Where a sister might normally sit near the family, there was nothing. My parents had told guests I had an urgent work obligation. Apparently, Mom did not want Preston's family knowing the bride had disinvited her own sister after using her money. The photographs online were stunning. Garden ceremony, white flowers, candlelight, champagne. My mother posted, "Every sacrifice was worth seeing our girl this happy." I stared at that caption and finally understood something. I had been one of the sacrifices. I closed Instagram. Theo and I ate tacos after my event ended. He asked whether I wanted to talk about it. No, we watched a terrible action movie instead. It was one of the kindest nights anyone ever gave me. Life became quieter after June. I stopped doing the unpaid family labor I had treated as normal for years. Contracts, reservations, travel plans, vendor favors, holiday logistics. Each no felt cruel for 5 minutes and peaceful afterward. Theo and I continued planning our own greenhouse wedding for 72 people. We invited people who had shown up for us before there was a ceremony to reward them with. My parents and Blair were not on the list. Dad sent one email asking if they would receive invitations. I answered, "No." He replied, "I understand," which surprised me. Mom sent a 4-page message about cruelty, family, and regret. I did not finish it. By fall, I heard Blair and Preston were struggling. The wedding debt had embarrassed my parents. Blair wanted a condo they could not comfortably afford, and Preston had started pushing back on spending. I did not enjoy hearing it. I simply no longer believed her happiness was my assignment. In October, Dad called. This time he did not ask for anything. "Your mother wants Thanksgiving together." "I'm sure she does." "I do too." "Why?" "Because I don't want another year to pass like this." I almost said no. Then he said, "I know you don't owe us a chance." That was new. Theo and I discussed it. "What would make going useful to you?" he asked. "I want to hear them say what happened without turning me into the problem." "Do you think they can?" "I don't know." "Then go only if you're prepared for the answer to be no." I agreed to Thanksgiving under simple rules. No money requests, no surprise relatives, and no social media photograph pretending we were healed. Mom hated the rules. Dad agreed to them. Theo and I drove to Street Louis Thanksgiving morning and stayed at a hotel. Dinner was only my parents, Blair, Preston, Theo, and me. Blair looked tired. She hugged me awkwardly. For the first hour we stayed polite, and the forced normality was almost worse than open conflict. After dinner, Dad put down his coffee. "We need to talk," Mom immediately said. "Do we have to do this tonight?" "Yes." That surprised all of us. Dad looked at me. "I used money your grandfather meant for you. Some of that money was money you added yourself. I did it without asking because your mother and I decided Blair's wedding needed it more." That was wrong. My throat tightened. Mom stared at him. "Paul." "It was. You're making it sound like we stole from her." "We took money she believed was reserved for her and used it without telling her." "For her sister." That doesn't change the sentence. I looked at Dad. "Why did you do it?" He swallowed. Because saying no to your mother would have created a fight, and I knew you were more likely to survive being disappointed. There it was, the truth underneath 30 years. So you chose the person who would make your life easiest. His eyes filled. Yes. Mom stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. Sit down, Denise, Dad said. I had never heard him speak to her like that. She stared at him, then sat. You both act like Blair demanded this, she said. I looked at my sister. Did you know the fund included my money? Blair hesitated. Not at first. When did you know? Before the planning dinner. The answer landed hard. How long before? Maybe a month. And you said nothing. Mom told me you had already agreed to use most of it. I looked at Mom. Did you? She waved a hand. I said you would understand. That is not what she said. Blair's face crumpled. I should have called you. Yes, I didn't because the deposits were already paid and I knew if I asked questions everything would explode. So you let me walk into dinner without knowing. Yes, and then you laughed. Tears filled her eyes. I was uncomfortable. You clapped. I know. Then you removed me from your wedding. I was angry. At me? At everything. Preston's parents were asking why vendors suddenly changed terms. Mom was crying constantly. Dad was panicking about money. Everyone kept saying it was because you pulled out. Did anyone say it was because you spent money that wasn't yours? Silence. Preston finally spoke. I didn't know until after the wedding. We all looked at him. Blair told me in July. My parents didn't know either. We had assumed the Walsh family had set a budget they were comfortable with. Mom looked humiliated. Preston, this is private. He shook his head. It stopped being private when you used it to make my wedding look more expensive than it needed to be. Blair looked at him, wounded. Our wedding. You know what I mean, Mom said. Everyone is acting like I did this for myself. I turned toward her. Why did you do it? Because Blair had one chance to enter that family correctly. Preston's face changed. Enter my family? Mom continued despite him. Your parents have standards. Their friends have standards. I was not going to let my daughter look cheap. Preston said quietly. My mother wanted 80 people and a church hall. Blair actually laughed through tears. Mom froze. Preston continued. You were the one who kept saying my family expected more. We didn't. For the first time, I watched my mother confront the possibility that the enormous wedding had not even been demanded by the people she was trying to impress. That's not true, she said. My mother complained about the guest list every week. She wanted smaller. She loved the flowers. Everyone loves flowers after they arrive. That doesn't mean she asked you to spend $70,000 that belonged to Corinne. Mom's voice rose. I was trying to give Blair a beautiful start, I said. Why did my start have to fund hers? Because you did not need help. She slammed her palm lightly against the table. There, fine. You want me to say it? You never needed us the way she did. You had scholarships, jobs, a career. Theo. You always land on your feet. Blair gets overwhelmed. She makes bad decisions when she feels unsupported. I knew you would survive losing the money. The room went silent. I felt Theo's hand touch mine under the table. Do you hear what you just said? I asked. Mom's eyes filled, but she did not look away. I said you're strong. No. You said my strength made me safer to hurt. Her face changed. I continued. You spent my childhood calling me capable whenever you needed an excuse not to show up. You spent my adulthood using competence like a tax. I got good grades, so Blair got the tutor. I handled disappointment, so you went to her events. I built a career, so my savings became available. I knew vendors, so my professional reputation became part of her wedding. Then when I stopped helping, you called that cruelty, Mom whispered. I never meant it like that. Meaning is not magic. Blair covered her mouth. Dad began crying quietly. I looked at my sister. And you benefited from it? I know. Do you? I'm starting to. What happens when Mom says you need more now? Blair looked at Preston, then at her hands. I think that's part of why my marriage is a mess. Preston did not correct her. She continued. I expect people to rescue me before I even decide what I'm willing to give up. When Preston said we couldn't afford the condo I wanted, I thought he was being unsupportive. Then he asked me what I had saved myself, and I got angry because I didn't have an answer. Mom said, "Blair, you don't need to humiliate yourself." Blair looked at her. That sentence is the problem. Another silence. Then she turned to me. "I'm sorry." I waited. She understood. "I'm sorry I knew part of the money was yours and let them use it. I'm sorry I laughed at dinner. I'm sorry I let Mom turn your boundary into jealousy because it made me feel less guilty. And I'm sorry I removed you from the wedding after using your work to make the wedding happen." Clean apology. No, but I felt tears come before I wanted them. "Thank you," she asked. "Do you forgive me?" "I don't know yet." Her face fell, but she nodded. "Okay," Mom immediately said. "How long are we going to punish each other?" I turned to her. "That question is why you and I are not in the same place." I apologized. "When?" "I'm sorry you were hurt." "That is not an apology for what you did." She became defensive again. "I cannot change the past." "No one asked you to." "Then what do you want from me?" The answer surprised me because it was so simple. "Nothing." She stared. "Nothing?" "I came because Dad asked for one honest conversation. I got it. I don't need repayment. I don't need you to admit I was the better daughter. I don't want Blair's life. I want you to stop expecting access to mine while refusing to understand why I left yours." Her face went pale. "So you're cutting us off?" "I'm setting different relationships." I looked at Dad. "You and I can talk if you keep doing what you did tonight. Tell the truth, without asking me to make it easier." I looked at Blair. "If we rebuild, it will be slowly, and without me becoming your fixer." Then Mom, "You and I need distance." "For how long?" "I don't know." "Until after your wedding?" I understood what she was really asking. "You are not invited." She inhaled sharply. Dad closed his eyes. Mom whispered, "You would really get married without your mother?" "You helped Blair get married without her sister." "That is different." "It always is when I'm the one losing something." She stood and walked out of the room. Nobody followed her. That may have been the first family gathering of my life where we did not organize ourselves around stopping my mother from being upset. Theo and I returned to Kansas City the next morning. I expected to feel triumphant. I felt exhausted. Boundaries do not erase grief. Sometimes they simply give grief somewhere clean to sit. Over the next 4 months, Dad called every few weeks and never pressured me to speak to Mom. Blair texted occasionally. Our conversations shifted from apologies to ordinary life. She and Preston started counseling, chose a modest rental instead of an expensive condo, and Blair took a steady full-time job. We were not magically close. We were becoming real, which was better. Mom sent letters. The first was 6 pages explaining her intentions. I did not answer. The second was shorter and angrier. I did not answer. The third arrived 2 weeks before my wedding. It said only, "I understand now that calling you strong became an excuse for expecting you to tolerate what I would never have asked Blair to tolerate. I am sorry I took your money. I am sorry I called your future an expense. I am sorry I taught you that being reliable meant being less deserving of care. I know an apology does not create an invitation." I read that paragraph 3 times. Then I cried. I still did not invite her. An apology can be real, and consequences can remain real. Those two truths do not cancel each other. I wrote back one sentence: "Thank you for finally naming what happened." Our wedding took place in April at the greenhouse outside Kansas City. Dad attended alone. Blair and Preston came too. Mom did not. The empty place where she might have sat hurt. And I let it hurt. Protecting myself did not require pretending I had stopped loving her. After the ceremony, Dad gave me a photocopy of one of Grandpa Walter's old notes. Equal does not mean identical outcomes. It means nobody gets to decide one child's future matters more. Dad said, "I should have remembered." I answered, "You should have." He nodded without asking me to comfort him. Mom later mailed Theo and me a simple congratulations card with no guilt attached. Over the next year, we had limited contact coffee once, a birthday call, no staged reconciliation. Blair and I rebuilt faster because she stopped treating me like a fixer. Trust returned through boring, respectful behavior, rather than one emotional speech. Dad repaid the $14,000 I had personally contributed to the fund. "This isn't buying forgiveness," he told me. "It's money you earned and I had no right to spend." I accepted it. The rest of Grandpa's money was gone, and I stopped needing an equal check to prove my future had value. Theo and I later bought a modest house in Overland Park. Blair and Preston stabilized too. Mom began making quieter changes of her own. I noticed without turning every decent act into a redemption scene. The biggest change happened inside me. I stopped being proud of needing less. As a child, competence had protected me from disappointment. As an adult, it had become a cage. I started asking Theo for help, delegating more at work, and occasionally telling friends I was not fine. Even Blair and I eventually reached the point where I could call simply because I needed my sister, not because either of us needed a favor. I used to think the opposite of favoritism was equal distribution. Same amount of money, same number of phone calls, same size birthday cake. Now I think the opposite of favoritism is refusing to turn children into roles. One child should not become the fragile one who must always be rescued. Another should not become the strong one who must always absorb the cost. Strength does not reduce a person's need for care. Competence is not consent. Reliability is not an unlimited family resource. And being able to survive unfairness does not make unfairness acceptable. My mother once believed Blair's future was an investment and mine was an expense. The irony is that the life I built became more valuable the moment I stopped trying to convince her otherwise. Not financially, personally. Peace is expensive when you spend decades purchasing belonging with usefulness. The day you stop paying can feel like losing a family. Sometimes it is actually the first day you discover who can remain connected to you without the service you provided. Dad did. Blair eventually did. Mom is still learning. Some relatives did not. That is okay. I no longer need a full room to prove I belong somewhere. I need a room where nobody is quietly calculating what my presence can solve. And that is why, looking back, I do not consider the night I walked out of my parents' dining room the night I lost my family. It was the night I resigned from the job they had mistaken for daughterhood. I did not destroy Blair's wedding. I stopped subsidizing it with money, labor, and reputation they had never bothered to ask whether I still wanted to give. They were forced to discover the difference. So was I. And if there is one question I still debate, it is this. If your parents secretly used money your grandparents had set aside for you and money you personally saved to fund your favored sibling's luxury wedding, then called that sibling an investment and you an expense, would you ever allow them back into your life after a sincere apology? Or would some betrayals permanently change what the word family is allowed to mean?